So the talk is going to be on another story from the Lotus Sutra. And as most of you will know, we're into the second week of a 4-week-long series of talks on stories from the Lotus Sutra. As Vidanya said last week, the Lotus Sutra is probably the most influential Mahayana sutra. And it's probably the most influential one because although it was written in India, it was translated into Chinese and Japanese and Tibetan and various other languages. And it became incredibly influential in Chinese and Japanese Buddhism in particular, and those are two massive areas of the Buddhist world. And the Lotus Sutra is cosmic in its scale. It's devotional in its mood, and it teaches the Dharma in terms of archetypal symbols and imagery and stories. The Buddha of the Lotus Sutra isn't so much the historical Buddha that we read about in the Pali Canon, the stories about the Buddha's historical life. He's much more an archetypal Buddha in a really cosmic sense. And also in the Lotus Sutra, a number of the archetypal bodhisattvas make their appearance. So some of the ones you'll have heard of, like Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri, have parts in the Lotus Sutra. They appear and they speak, they tell stories. The Buddha has conversations with them. And there's another important bodhisattva called Samantabhadra that some of you might have come across. So the Lotus Sutra, it's a very colourful sutra. And tonight's story is one of the stories that appears in the Lotus Sutra. And the story is called, well, I won't tell you what it's called, I'll just tell you the story. So the story starts with a house. It starts with quite a long description of a house. And this is a house somewhere in the ancient East. It's the house of an elder, quite an important man in the locality. It's a very large house. It's got many, many rooms. It's got many courtyards. It's got stairs, corridors, attics, cellars. It's a really, really huge house. It's a rambling house. Over the centuries, it's been extended. It's had annexes built, extra bits built on, rooms that have changed their shape, and so on. But one of the things about this house is there's only one way in and way out of this house. And I suspect that was probably fairly common in the Far East in days gone by. Because if you've just got one entrance to your house, well, you can put a guard on it and just keep an eye on who's coming in and who's going out of your house. Especially if you've got a really big household where there are lots of people coming and going. The house is made of wood. And it's very, very, very old. It's old. It's a bit scruffy. It's a bit decrepit, actually. Some of the wood is rotting. One or two of the floorboards are a bit dodgy. Occasionally, during the monsoons, the roof leaks. The rooms, some of them are dusty. Some rooms have just been piled high with junk and forgotten about. You get the picture, it's quite an old house. In parts of the house, there are cockroaches and rats and other vermin. And parts of the house are even haunted by spirits from the past. They just hang around. So the elder lives here with his household. Huge household. He's an important man. He's got quite a few wives. He's got stewards. He's got servants. He's got grooms, he's got people who look after his livestock, he's got cooks, all sorts of servants. He's got quite a big family. His immediate family of the children, the children that he's fathered himself, to his various wives, but the families of all his retainers as well. So that actually there's quite a big community live in this big rambling house. And that includes, well, so the population of the house probably runs to well over 100, and there are over 30 children living in the house. So, yeah, in this house, this big, old, rambling wooden house, a fire starts. And because it's a big, rambling wooden house, the fire actually spreads very quickly. All that old combustible wood. It's a daytime fire. Quite a lot of the adults are already out, going about their business. And those who were inside actually managed to make an escape fairly quickly. But there's a real worry about the children of the house. So in this house, we said over 30 children, and they're all playing. They're playing in different parts of the house, in groups of different sizes, playing all sorts of games. Well, in a big house like that, there's probably endless nooks and crannies that children can get into and play in. So the elder of the house, who realises what's happening, is really, really concerned for his children, or for the children of the house. And his immediate response is to just yell out as quickly as he can, "Come out, fire, fire, come out, come out. You need to get out of the house quickly." There's absolutely no response from the children. Yes, it's a bit like the tea room at Sangha Night at 9:15. Come upstairs quickly, we're going to meditate. And what happens? Okay, it's a bit like that with the children. Okay, they're just too busy doing interesting things. They're having interesting conversations, they're playing with their toys, they're hiding from each other. They've got far better things to do than run out of the house at the beck and call of some adult who probably wants them to do something really boring. So the elder has to do some quick thinking. He's not going to get 30-odd children out of the house by reasoning with them. He needs to make them want to get out of the house. So he changes his strategy. And what he now does is, he says, "Children, come and look at the toys I've got outside for you. All your favourite toys. I've got goat carts, I've got deer carts, I've got bullock carts. If you don't come out, you'll be sorry. Come out to the gate and I'll give you whatever you want." And guess what? The children come out, pushing and racing each other, scrambling and tumbling, elbowing each other out of the way to be first out to the gate to get the pick of the toys. And when they get out, they say, "So where are our toys? Where are all these goodies you promised us?" And the elder is so relieved that they've all come out. He's so filled with love for them all that he orders the very best bullock carts for every single one of them. The bullock carts are really something. And it says here, read page 87 of the Lotus Sutra, and I've forgotten to bring it. So I have to tell you what it says about these bullock carts. It says these bullock carts were light and airy. They were studded with precious gems. They were carpeted inside with fine rugs and draped with curtains. And each one came with its own servants and retainers and was pulled by the finest of white bullocks, mind you. White bullocks are absolutely the best. And these white bullocks are not only white, which apparently was very prized for a bullock, they were bullocks that would walk evenly without swaying from side to side, so that when you took a ride in these bullock carts, the cart would not be flung from side to side, as it normally would be, apparently, in a bullock cart. So these bullock carts were quite something. They were really, really good. Much better than deer carts or goat carts. So, and that's the story. Okay? It's called The Story of the Burning House. So, you've probably got the idea by now that all of the stories in the Lotus Sutra have got meanings. They're all parables. So what's the meaning of this story? So first of all, the house. The house, I think, represents the world that we live in. It represents the world we live in. It's shaped by the past. It's conditioned by what's happened over the years, over the centuries. Full of discarded stuff from the past, full of the ghosts of the past. Old, bit scruffy, bit dog-eared, Often not quite fit for purpose, but familiar. And, we like what's familiar, don't we? We feel safe with it. So, in a way, the house is ourselves. It's the lives that we've constructed for ourselves, the world that we inhabit. It's a bit like my house. So, and burning, well, burning represents danger. It represents urgency. So traditionally, the burning represents samsara. It represents samsara, the world we live in, burning with the fires of greed, hatred and delusion. Remember the three poisons at the very hub of the wheel of life. And there's a sense in which, well, greed and hatred, well, aversion, they are a bit like fires. They're a bit like fires in that, well, once I allow my resentment, for instance, to get going, or once I've really let go into greed, it's difficult to quench it. It's difficult to stop it from spreading. And they're a bit like fires because actually they're fairly destructive of my own states of mind and of the world in general, my relationships with other people. So burning is, well, it's the danger of the dangers of samsara. The elder, I think, represents something a bit higher than our usual mundane selves. So maybe you could say the elder represents our higher selves, the selves that we aspire to be in the future, our future enlightened selves, perhaps. The part of us that knows what is truly good for us. So yeah, you can either imagine it as that, as something internal, or you can externalize it and imagine the elder as being, well, the unconditioned, interconnectedness. You could even externalize it and say, well, it represents the Buddha, or the Dharma, or even the Sangha. You could say that it's, in a way, it's the rest of reality beckoning to us as one of the small components of reality. And what about the children? Well, I think the children are us as well. They're us absorbed in the games of life. The housemaking games, the romantic games, the reputation games, the money-making games, the making a living games. And some of the games that we play are actually very noble games. They're altruistic. And some are pure distraction. TV, Scrabble, to name one of mine. Yeah, we do get absorbed in our games, the games that constitute our lives. And actually, although we pay lip service to impermanence, we tend to act as if we're going to live forever. I know. I got almost to the bottom today of my in tray and came across the will that I started to make a year ago, and I still haven't finished it. I know it's important, but it never seems urgent, really. It's a bit like clearing out my attic. And we do get engrossed in the games of life. And life makes demands on us. Life is demanding. It needs a lot of energy. It needs a lot of time. So yes, next thing, escape. So I suppose escape is about getting out of the burning house. I suppose it's about enlightenment. I suppose it's about getting out of samsara. Okay, enlightenment, wouldn't that be wonderful? But if we're honest, how interested are we in enlightenment? I know it sounds great. But do we really believe it's going to happen within the timescales that we can envisage? And usually we've just got more urgent things to do. We've got places to go, we've got people to see, we've got jobs to do, we've got a living to make, and, well, enlightenment, well, that's a longer-term goal. Think about that later. It's a bit like the jam tomorrow that Alice is promised by the Queen of Hearts in Through the Looking Glass. The Queen of Hearts promises jam tomorrow but never jam today. And not surprisingly, Alice isn't very interested. Because jam today has become, it's become a sort of a well-worn phrase these days, hasn't it? It's synonymous with something pleasant that we're promised, but which we're not really sure we'll ever get. And then there's the carts. Okay, so the carts, I think, represent what we're really interested in, what will tempt us from our games and get us running and tumbling towards enlightenment. So the carts are a bit like the summer fair that will get me to do my long-intended clear out of the cellar. So goat carts and deer carts and bullock carts may not seem that appealing to us in the 21st century. And maybe you have to substitute, and I can't do this, but some of you will be able to do it, 3 different makes of cars. I don't know enough makes of cars. But I was thinking, all right, from a little boy perspective, maybe you could substitute postman pat vans, JCBs and fire engines, where fire engines are definitely equivalent to the bullock carts. I've seen my nephews with fire engines. Little boys really like fire engines. So the three types of cart do represent something that's really significant, that's really important. And in the sutra, the Buddha actually is explicit about what they represent. He says they represent different goals, different aims for the spiritual life in different Buddhist traditions. So the first goal that is mentioned is the Shravaka tradition. It's the tradition of Buddhists who practice to escape from samsara to nirvana. This is the Buddhism, especially of the monastic traditions. In that tradition, well, yes, it's all about nirvana. It's about escaping from samsara, escaping from the world with its dukkha, with its sufferings. The second tradition, so I guess that's represented by the goat cart. The second tradition that the Buddha mentions is the tradition of the Pratyeka Buddhas, the private Buddhas, the solitary Buddhas. And that's the tradition in which Buddhists practice in order to become Buddhas. I mean, they practice in order to become enlightened. But what they're aiming for is to be enlightened themselves. And the Buddha says, well, that's a bit like the deer carts. And then the third tradition that the Buddha mentions is the tradition of the Buddhists who are practicing for the sake of enlightenment for all beings. Okay, so a kind of wider take on why we would be practicing for enlightenment. And that third one is synonymous with the Bodhisattva ideal, which is the ideal of the Mahayana tradition, really. But, the Buddha says, whichever aim you have, whichever goal you have for your spiritual life, in fact, there is really only one aim. There's only one Dharma, there's only one spiritual path, and they're all the, whichever goal you're heading for, in fact, in the end, you're heading for the goal, and the goal is full and perfect enlightenment for yourself and all other living beings. So, I suppose what the Buddha's saying is that whatever we're aiming for, as long as it genuinely leads to enlightenment, it's a valid spiritual goal. It'll get us out of the burning house. If it gets us out of the burning house, that's good. And eventually, the Buddha is saying, well, we'll all get the real McCoy. We'll get the bullock cart with a white bullock. We'll get full and perfect enlightenment, whether that's what we're aiming for now or not. So, this parable is often quoted as an illustration of something called skillful means. Skillful means or tactful means, as it's described in some translations of this sutra. And skillful means are, well, in a way, what I've just described. Skillful means are having a goal which isn't necessarily full and perfect enlightenment, because that might seem a bit far off, but is a nearer and more motivating goal for the spiritual life. And actually, this skillful means thing occasionally provokes a bit of controversy, especially when in a discussion group we're talking about skillful means, we're talking about this parable. Because what's controversial is, well, didn't the elder tell a lie to his children? Didn't he promise them that they could have goat carts and deer carts, as well as bullock carts? In fact, I think, because I actually reread the story, he promises them they can have whatever they want, whatever toys they want. And actually, what he gives each of them is, he gives each of them a bullock cart. And actually, in the sutra, the Buddha asks Sariputra, one of his disciples, who is standing conveniently close by, he says, was the elder guilty of a falsehood? And Sariputra says, no, because all the children got an even better cart than they could possibly have imagined. What was really motivating them was a goat cart, but actually they got a bullock cart, and that's much, much better. So, in a way, all right, so it's technically a lie. So it's controversial. And actually, I wonder whether that little bit of controversy is put in just to really make us think about what's being presented. We can imagine that it was put in because it's a little bit ethically ambiguous. We have to think about it a bit. And in a way, it highlights the central message of the story. The elder is presenting his children with a goal that they can relate to. He's speaking their language. He's tempting them with something that he knows they really, really want. And so that's skillful means. And if he gives them something that's even better than what they really, really want, well, that's fine, because, well, hey, if you can be happy with a goat cart, you're going to be even happier with the bullock cart. But skillful means is definitely about benefiting others. It is not about manipulating the truth to suit your own ends, just in case you're wondering. So, the message of the sutra is about goals, and it's about what motivates us. So what does it mean for us? Well, I think actually what it means is that we need to be our own elder. And we need to recognise we need to recognise what our inner children want and need. We need to recognise what's going to really get the interest of our inner children. We need to identify the toys that are going to tempt us, if you like. So we need a goal. We need to be able to frame the goal of the spiritual life in a way that seems attractive to us. So that when we put our head up and look around and think, well, what is my life about? We've got something about which we'll think, oh yeah, that's inspiring. I want to, that is something that I want to sign up for, rather than, well, I suppose that I ought to be working towards enlightenment. And more important than that, we need to recognise the toys that we'll want enough to come running out of the house for them. We need to recognise the things that are really going to give us pleasure in the spiritual life. So, in a way, we all need to think about what those two are for us. What are the goals that are really going to interest us? What are the things in the spiritual life that really give us pleasure? And just to get you thinking for yourselves, I'm going to talk about some of mine. So first of all, what's my goal? And, so I probably should say, well, my goal is enlightenment. But to be honest, that does seem a bit remote. And part of me wonders whether I'm up to it in this lifetime. I put in the practice, the ethics, the meditation, the Dharma study, but my experience often seems a million miles away from insight into the nature of existence. And I can pay lip service to it, but, something about it that doesn't really tempt me. It does seem a bit like jam tomorrow. But there are ways of framing the goal of the spiritual life that I do find more tempting. And my favourite, there are several actually that I like. My favourite is the Sangha as Bodhisattva. And in that kind of way of framing things, well, we are collectively, as a Sangha, aiming to bring enlightenment into the world. So by all of us practicing more and more in accordance with the principles of enlightenment, we bring enlightenment more and more into the world that we share and that we conjure up for ourselves, and that we spread, in a way, to the immediate vicinity of the Sangha. So I like that as a goal. It isn't just jam tomorrow, because I can, very occasionally, experience it happening. And that is something that interests me, because I really enjoy it. Sometimes it's momentary, and it's intangible, and it's imperfect, but just sometimes I notice it as the spirit of the Sangha acting at its best, with real kindness, with real friendliness and openness, acting to support each other, and acting from inspiration. It's something that I sometimes notice when we're meditating together. There's a lot of us meditating up here. I notice it at the end of a really good puja. I often notice it in pujas. And I notice it especially on retreats. And it's incredibly enjoyable and inspiring. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel good, and it's kind of proved to me that, well, there is a possibility that together we can do something that is just spreading the spirit of enlightenment in the world. And that encourages me to put some effort into being with the Sangha and helping to build Sangha. So if enlightenment sounds like jam tomorrow, then maybe you need to find a way of framing what you're aiming for on your spiritual path, so that it seems more appealing to you personally. That's just one example. Okay, framing a goal, a long-term goal for the spiritual life might seem quite a tall order, but we can all look for things that will give us pleasure on the path. And this is absolutely essential, okay? It is absolutely essential that there are things about being on a spiritual path that give you pleasure. Because if there aren't any things like that, then you're not going to stay on it for very long. You absolutely need to find pleasure. Okay, so what is it for me? I'm going to tell you some of the things that I really enjoy. One of the things that I really enjoy is gardening. And, amazingly, at about the time that I really got committed to being involved here, the Buddhist Centre moved into this premises that has 2 acres of garden. How's that for luck? So now, every Monday morning, I get the chance to work with a team of Sangha friends to create a garden for the Buddhist Centre. And those of you who have been in the garden will have seen the results. It's not perfect, but it gets better and better as time goes on. Another thing I enjoy is walking in the Peak District. I actually moved to Sheffield because I wanted to walk in the Peak District. But what I discovered is that I can add enjoyment to my walking by walking mindfully. And actually, that seems to feed into my general practice of mindfulness, my practice of developing more mindfulness. When I'm walking mindfully, I really, really look at the world while I'm walking. I really see the views. I see the greenness of the trees. I see the grand sweep of peak beyond peak out in the Peak District. I really smell the lime blossom that's on the trees at the moment. I really hear the lark's songs when I'm walking out on the moors. I really feel the breeze. So mindfulness just makes my experience of walking much more enjoyable. And hey, it's spiritual practice. I'm developing my mindfulness practice. I'm making myself more aware. I also enjoy the arts. I enjoy both music and art. And actually, I remember a conversation that I had with the then Mitra convener when I was having that little conversation that you have to have with a Mitra convener when you've asked to be a Mitra. And what I said was, it's a shame, isn't it, that the Christians have got all the best music and art. And actually, as I said it, I thought, I think I'm going to have to find out something about Buddhist art. So art, first of all. After that conversation, I started to take an interest in Buddhist art. And actually, it opened up a whole world of art that I knew absolutely nothing about. I bought books on Buddhist art. I visited Buddhist collections in museums in London. I went to Paris to visit the Musée Guimet. And I really, really enjoyed just getting familiar with the different styles and traditions of Buddhist art. And it actually taught me a lot about the different Buddhist traditions in different parts of the world, and what those Buddhist traditions are trying to tell the world about through their art. In ancient India, there are lots of sculptures showing scenes from the life of the Buddha. And I learned quite a lot about the life of the Buddha from looking at these pictures and figuring out what they were about and reading the appropriate stories. I looked at Zen and Burmese sitting Buddhas sitting in meditation. And that taught me quite a lot about, well, not only meditation posture, but meditation itself. Something about the serenity and the states of mind that we're aiming at in meditation, and so on. I enjoy art, I enjoy music. Now, I haven't actually come across similar traditions of Buddhist music, but actually I have kept listening to music, and there are a few aspects of music that have really fed into my practice. And the first thing is actually just listening to music. When I say just listening, I mean just listening to music, not kind of doing, not listening to music while I'm doing the washing up or doing something else, but just sitting and listening to music. And actually, that's become a bit of a practice in itself. It's almost a bit like meditating, because if I'm just listening to music, then I need to bring the whole of my awareness to what's going on. I need to bring the whole of my attention to it, because I know that if I don't, I'm going to miss some of it. The wonderful thing about music is, it's there and then it's gone. It's past. And so if we're not there with it, then we've missed it, we've lost it. And actually, that practice of just sitting with music calms me down, it concentrates me in a way that a good mindfulness of breathing, meditation, will do it. And actually, sometimes, to be honest, it does it more quickly and more easily. So the other thing about music is it evokes emotions. Certain sort of music evokes a longing. It suggests impermanence and change. It gives me a perspective on life. Its fleeting nature, its joys and sorrows, the kind of ups and downs of life seem to be suggested by a lot of music. And that puts me in touch with, it just puts me in touch with impermanence, really. And some music evokes reverence. It's so beautiful, it's so grand in scale, so mysterious. And it conjures up something that is so intricate, but so cosmic in a way, that it just conjures up the complexity of reality, the complexity of the universe. And Christian devotional music in particular probably does that best, which in a way is designed to, really. I enjoy music, I listen to music, and it's a practice of mindfulness, and it can conjure up reverence and all sorts of other positive emotions for me. And the final thing that I enjoy is just, the internal pleasure of feeling calm and happiness. And I know, because it's happened on many occasions, that if I really put some time and effort into my meditation practice, then I can experience some very pleasurable, even blissful states of mind. And that encourages me. It encourages me to cultivate the conditions for that to happen. So it encourages me to give a bit more time to my meditation, to go to meditation events, and especially to go on retreat, because that's when I'm most likely to be able to really get into my meditation. So those are the things that give me pleasure and that I kind of plough into my spiritual life. What might the story of the burning house mean for you, finally? Well, I think probably it means that you need to look at your goals. You need to look at how you are thinking about why you are on a spiritual path at all. You need to think about aspects of enlightenment that you find most appealing. And you might need to look for some intermediate goals. One of the things that always really strikes me on the very first night of the introductory course, we ask people why they're here. And actually people have got some very, very tangible intermediate goals. They say things like, I want to de-stress, I want to get calmer, I want to improve my relationships with people, I want to become happier. I mean, all of those things, they're really good, sort of medium-term goals, intermediate goals, if you like. Intermediate goals could also mean just sorting out some sort of harmful samskara, harmful habit, like reactivity or road rage or something like that. And actually, if you can already see that the spiritual life is doing you some good, then you might like to think about another intermediate goal, which would be taking a next step, committing yourself a little bit more. You might think about becoming a mitra, or even becoming an order member. Because when you make those commitments, then whole lots of other possibilities open up to you, including many possibilities for cultivating pleasure in your spiritual path. And as to cultivating pleasure, well, you can look to cultivate some pleasure in your meditation in some of the ways that I've described. You can try to cultivate enjoyment of the Sangha. You can just enjoy the friendly atmosphere of being around the Sangha. You can give yourself opportunities to do things with Sangha friends. You can come and help at the summer fair. You can come to Sangha work days. You can help with the regular cleaning and other voluntary work that we need doing in the centre. If you enjoy climbing, you can go climbing with Sangha friends. See Kate. If you're interested in ecology, you can join the ecology group. I mean, there are lots of things that the Sangha are interested in. Do things with your Sangha friends. Come to the open mic night on the 3rd of August that Terry's organising. If you enjoy rituals, then you can cultivate your enjoyment by, you can come to rituals, you can come to pujas. Bring your own offering for the shrine. Or you can chant a mantra, or do dedication verses or refuges and precepts before you meditate at home. Okay, so just some ways that you can look for pleasure in the spiritual life. So the story of the burning house is a parable about finding enjoyment in the spiritual life. It's about tempting ourselves out of the burning house of samsara, and it's about looking for sort of short, medium-term goals in the spiritual life, things that are really going to help us along the path. And they're all skillful means that will lead us ultimately towards the goal of full and perfect enlightenment for ourselves and others. So thank you very much for listening.